Welcome back, everyone. Today we're gonna be making a fun bag. It's a crossbody travel bag or purse/wallet. You can really use this bag for a lot of different things. The bag measures in at 8 by 6.5 by 2 inches. So it's a great size for your cards, keys, phone, and any other daily use small items. In this bag, we're gonna be adding multiple pockets and also slots for your cards. And each one of these features requires a different technique, so it's gonna take your overall sewing skills to that next level. And with all that being said, if you're new to the channel, grab that printable pattern and let's get started. Getting started supplies, you're gonna need 1 yard for your main fabric, and I recommend grabbing a canvas, denim, or twill. It's gonna be easier to work with these fabrics if you're new to sewing. I'm actually gonna be using upholstery fabric. These are a little bit harder to work with. They fray a lot, it's a looser weave, so overall, it's just a little bit harder to actually maneuver around the fabric. But realistically, you can use any fabric you want for this bag. You'll need 1 yard for your secondary fabric, and this is gonna be a lining. I recommend grabbing something lighter weight. I'm gonna be using just a standard lighter weight cotton. This is a great fabric, and it reduces overall bulk in the end product. You'll need 3 zippers. You'll need 2 10-inch or more and 1 14-inch or more. You definitely wanna keep them over 10 inches and over 14 inches because we're gonna be snipping the ends of the zippers, so you don't wanna go smaller. I actually recommend going bigger. It's a lot easier to work with the bigger zipper and just snip the ends. But we'll get more into that later. You'll need 2 1-inch lobster clasps, or any other style of clasp will work too. The biggest thing you wanna worry about is the width. Going along with the clasp, you'll need 1 1-inch slide adjuster and 2 D-rings. You'll want to keep all these at the same width. So if you're using 1 inch, you'll want 1 inch for your clasp, your slider, and your D-rings. And this varies. You can actually change out the size if you want, depending on the strap you're using. So this pattern, we're actually going to be making our strap out of fabric, but there's also other alternatives. You can use webbing, and this is an easier, more durable method. And when it comes to using the webbing, you're going to want to make sure you grab the right size webbing to match your hardware. You'll need 2 snap button closures, and you can use magnetic or regular. I'm gonna be using magnetic. I like using these ones. They just work really nice, and it's so easy to get in and out of the bag. Lastly, you'll need your pattern. This pattern is available at properfitclothing.com. It's super easy to use. All you have to do is download it, print it off, and you're ready to go. And after you print off the pattern, it's best to cut off the top and the side edges. This is gonna allow you to overlap the pages and make for a perfectly aligned pattern. And after you have all your supplies gathered and your pattern printed out, it's time to move into cutting.
And after taping the pages together, your pattern should look like this. Moving on to cutting, you should end up with 2 pocket flap panels, cut out of your main fabric, or using a vinyl or some other secondary heavier weight fabric, adding to the overall design of the bag. 3 inside pocket panels, cut out of your secondary lining fabric, 1 main back inside pocket panel cut out of your lining, 4 side zipper panels, 2 cut out of your main fabric and 2 cut out of your lining, 2 side panels, 1 cut out of your main fabric and 1 cut out of your lining, 1 main back top panel cut out of your main fabric, 2 main back bottom panels, 1 cut out of your main fabric and 1 cut out of your lining, 2 main front outside pocket panels, 1 cut out of your main fabric and 1 cut out of your lining, 3 main front panels, 1 cut out of your main fabric and 2 cut out of your lining. You'll need 2 D-ring panels and 1 strap panel, cut out of your main fabric or another heavier weight fabric. And this is if you choose to make these. You can also substitute this with webbing. For the strap panel, you're going to want to cut this to your measurements. I recommend at least 56 inches or more. And this is if you choose to make it. You can also use webbing for the strap. And we'll go over this more later in the video. Moving on to construction, grab your main back bottom panels and your 10-inch or more zipper. Place the right side of the zipper on the top edge of the main fabric and the lining lined up on the opposite side, and stitch the top edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Flip the wrong sides together, lining up the top edge, and next we're going to pin it together and add a top stitch. I'm going to be using an edge presser foot to get a nice straight even top stitch, and this will also help me keep a uniform top stitch throughout the bag. And of course, this presser foot is not needed, but it's very helpful and comes in handy on a lot of projects. And feel free to do this top stitch at any depth you would like. I like to keep mine nice and close to the edge. Grab the main back top panel and place it on the opposite side with right sides together, lining up the edges and stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. And also feel free to use a zipper presser foot if that works best for you. After completing the stitch, flip the panel flat and we're going to add a top stitch to that edge. Try to keep it as uniform as possible as the opposite zipper edge. Grab the main back inside pocket panel and the other 10-inch plus zipper. Place the right sides together, lining up on the top edge of the panel and stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Just like the previous step, flip the zipper up and add a top stitch to the bottom edge. This will also help hide the raw edge on the inside. Grab the main front panel and you can place the main fabric and one of the linings off to the side. Place the lining flat with the right sides up. Line the inside pocket panel with the bottom edge and flip it over the horizontal axis. Pin the zipper into position and stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Flip the inside pocket panel back down, pinning both panels flat and add a top stitch to the top edge. I highly recommend using pins so that way both of the panels stay aligned. And essentially this is dividing the pockets, giving you separate pockets on the inside. Take that completed inside pocket panel, place the right sides down, place the completed back panel on top with wrong sides together, and we're going to stitch all the way around the outside edge. Before you start stitching, move the zipper train to the inside of the panel on the outside layer and also on your lining. I highly recommend pinning both of these layers together, and once everything is lined up, stitch all the way around the outside edge as close as you can to that edge. We're just securing these layers together so it's easier to attach the side panel later on. And after, just double check to make sure that you've sewn all the layers together. And next we're going to grab the main front outside pocket panels, place the right sides together, and stitch the top edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Flip the wrong sides together, lining up the top edge, add a few pins, and go ahead and top stitch that top edge. And as you can see, that presser foot really comes in handy when you're working with all these top stitches. Set the panel flat with the lining down, and next we're going to add our stitch guides. Make sure the guides are marked out even, and we're going to fold at both of those guide marks. Add a couple pins to both edges, double check the evenness, and stitch both of the edges just like a top stitch. This is going to help give us a little bit of depth to that front pocket. Place that off to the side and grab the inside pocket panels. Using the pattern as reference, we're going to mark and press out the seam and hem allowance on all of the pattern pieces. After pressing, we're going to start by top stitching the top edge of each of the panels. And it's key to keep each one of these pockets as symmetrical as possible. Same goes for the top stitch. Next, grab the main front panel lining. Using the pattern, we're going to mark out the inside pocket placement guides and place the pockets within the guides. We're going to first line up each pocket to make sure everything goes together square. After testing, we're going to place just one at the top, lining it up with the guides, and stitch just the bottom edge. From here, we're going to place the other two on again, making sure everything stays lined up. Again, remove the bottom pocket, leaving the middle pocket, and stitch the bottom edge. And after stitching, finally, we're going to place the bottom pocket into position and stitch the bottom edge and both of the side edges. And this was just to make sure we keep the correct alignment so that the cards will fit later on. Lastly, we're going to add a stitch to the center of the pocket so that way we have a divider for the cards. And it's best to add a nice tack stitch in this dividing stitch. And from here, we're going to place the right sides down, place the main front panel on top with the wrong sides together, and the front pocket panel on top of the main panel. As you can see, the front pocket panel is longer, so what you have to do is fold those sides in, lining up the side edges. Pin all of the panels together, making sure everything is lined up, and we're going to stitch the bottom and side edges. And again, this is going to help keep all the panels aligned together, so that way we can sew the side panel on very easily. Do a quick check, make sure all the layers got sewn together, and place it off to the side. Grab both of the pocket flat panels, place the right sides together, and stitch both the side and bottom edges at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Make sure to keep both of these corner stitches as even as possible. Before you flip the right sides out, add a few notches in both of the corners to reduce some of the bulk. Once you're satisfied with both of your notches, flip the right sides out, line up and pin the layers together, and add a top stitch to that entire seam. And as you can see, by keeping the corners uniform, it makes for a more square looking flat panel. You want this panel to look as nice as possible. Again, using the pattern, we're going to mark out the button placement, cut or punch holes in the marked areas. I'm using magnetic snaps. If you're using the same one, we're going to start by using the thinner side, placing it through the hole from the inside of the panel. Grab the cap and place it on the back end of the magnet. Repeat this process for the opposite side. Make sure you keep them even across the panel. I'm installing these with the press. You can also use hammer dies or pliers. And there you go, it's that simple to add nice magnetic snaps. Take that completed flat panel and add it to the top edge of your main front panel. Make sure it's lined up evenly on both sides and stitch as close as you can to that top edge. With the flap down, mark out where the snaps fall, and wherever you mark is where we're going to add the opposite side of the magnet. So cut your holes, add the magnet, pop the back caps on, and press it into position. And lastly, do a quick test to make sure that everything lines up. Next, we're going to grab the side zipper panels, and we're only going to start with one main panel and one lining. Take your 14-inch zipper, place the right sides together on the main fabric, and place the lining on the opposite side, lining up both of the panels. Stitch all the layers together at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Pin the wrong sides together, and we're going to do the same thing for the opposite set of panels, sandwiching the zipper in between. You really want to make sure you line up all of the side edges on both sides of the zipper. Once it's lined up, stitch and flip the wrong sides together. You'll definitely need pins to keep everything flat and lined up. Once it's lined up, add a top stitch to both sides of the zipper. It's very key to keep both of these top stitches as even as possible. This is the main opening of the bag, so it's very noticeable if there's any mess ups. Moving on, grab your D-ring holder panels. Using the pattern as reference, we're going to add the folds to each one of the panels. Depending on what fabric you're using, it's best to press each one of the folds or go ahead and pin it. Once you have it pressed or pinned, we're going to add a wider zigzag stitch so it connects on both sides of the fold. And obviously this is only one way of doing it. There are plenty of ways to actually making this stitch. You can use a double twin tip needle too. This is going to stitch both sides of the fold at once, giving you 2 uniform straight stitches. But either way works, so do whatever method that works best for you. After stitching, grab both of your D-rings, and we're going to feed the strap through the D-ring. With the strap evenly fed through the D-ring, we're going to place it on top of the zipper ends, and be sure to move the zipper chain to the inside of the panel. Once you have the straps lined up in the center of the zipper, stitch as close as you can to the outside edge, giving yourself a nice good tack stitch. Again, this is just holding these into position. Take the side panel, and we're going to start with the main fabric. Place the completed zipper panel right side together with the side panel. Place the lining side panel on top and stitch the edge at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Go slow over the zipper, flip the opposite end of the side panel to the opposite end of the zipper panel, and do the same for the lining. Sandwiching the zipper in between both of the side panels and stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance. Go slow over the zipper, and once you completed the stitch, flip the right sides out, lining up both the main fabric and the lining, and from here we're going to add a top stitch to both of the new side seams. Again, go slow because it's going to be very bulky going through all these layers. Lastly, trim the zipper ends flush with the side seam. Do a quick once over, make sure all the layers and everything is looking good. From here, we're going to mark the centers on the front panel and both sides of the completed side panel. Using those center marks, we're going to line up the side panel all the way around the outside edge of that front panel. And make sure you place that zipper on the top end. Pin it all together and stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around that outside edge. And this is that step you really got to take your time and go slow. Make sure you go slow around those corners. I'd recommend having the side panel face down towards the bottom of your machine as you're sewing. This way it's going to get pulled through your machine more evenly. Again, flip the right side out to make sure all the layers got stitched together. You definitely want to do these checks because it makes it so much easier. If you find a mistake, you can easily correct it. So flip it back the wrong sides out, grab the completed back panel, do the same exact thing, mark the centers, line up the centers, pin all the way around the outside edge. And once you're satisfied with the alignment, go ahead and stitch at a 1/4 inch seam allowance all the way around that outside edge. I would say both these steps are the most difficult, so if you don't get it right the first time, it's totally okay to de-thread it, try it again, because it takes a lot of practice to perfect this type of sewing. But it's definitely doable. So once you have it done, go ahead and snip all those zipper ends flush with the side seam. And from here, we're going to do the same thing, flip the right side out, make sure all the layers are sewn together, and you really want to make sure before we get into the next step. Flip the bag back inside out, and we're going to add bias tape to both of these inside edges. The first method is using a bias tape making kit, and this is where you make your own bias tape. It's super simple to do. You cut your bias tape strips, feed it through your folder, and press it as it's coming out your folder. And by picking this method, you get to choose the size and also the color of fabric to match your project. The second method is using a double fold bias tape binder. You install this to your machine and it gives you the ability to sew directly onto your garment. It's a very fast and effective technique. The third technique is using pre-made bias tape. This technique you're very limited to colors, but it's easy to do. You just fold it over your edge and stitch it down. This is a great way to go if you don't have a lot of tools to work with. I'm going to be using the attachment. I really like this method. It works very well and it's fast. If you're going to get into making a lot of bags, I highly recommend dedicating a single machine just to this step. It will really speed up your production. Also, by adding this bias tape to the inside edge, it's going to give a lot more strength to the bag and really pop those corners out. But again, you can totally skip this step if you don't have the tools. Flip the right side back out, and that's actually going to complete the bag portion. Next, we're going to move on to the strap. Grab the strap panel, and again we're going to cut it at about 56 to 57 inches. You can go longer. If you don't want to make your strap, the best alternative is using webbing. Cut the webbing at the same length and make sure it fits through your 1-inch hardware. From here, if you are using webbing, you can skip ahead to adding the hardware. Back to making the strap, we're going to make it the same way we did as the D-ring straps. So with each fold, press, pin, and move on down the strap. This process is very tedious and time consuming. Once you have everything folded, you can either use a twin tip needle or you can use the zigzag stitch like we did in the previous step. I'm using a zigzag stitch, but I'm folding as I'm going. I found this technique to be a little bit quicker. You can fold one side and flap the other under the fold. You can also use folders that do this in one step if you have a double needle sewing machine. But realistically, use whatever technique that works best for you. With the strap complete, or this is a spot if you're using webbing you can jump into, grab your hardware, your lobster clasps, and your slider. First feed the strap through the slider and slide it down about 1.5 feet. Slide one of your lobster clasps on the same end and bring that end back through the slider from the outside opening to the inside opening. Take the end that went back through the slider, fold it over on top of itself twice to hide the raw edge. Pin the strap end into position and add a tack stitch. Feed your second lobster clasp on the opposite side of the strap, fold the strap end over twice, and add a tack stitch. And it's important you secure these ends down really good. And that's going to complete your strap. If you're using webbing, the hardware is installed the exact same way. From here, we can clip it onto our bag. And the fun thing about making the strap, you can use a bunch of different fabrics to give yourself a different strap for each different day you use it.
And there you have it, your crossbody travel bag purse is complete. Thank you so much for watching and supporting the channel. This was definitely a fun bag to make. I'm gonna be making more smaller bags like this, and that's gonna lead me into more purse and wallet projects. So I'll definitely have those coming in the very near future. And like always, if you have anything you want me to make, definitely send it my way. Either comment down below or send a message to my website. But like always, I'm gonna keep the projects coming at you, so I'll see you next time.